These are my criteria for selecting exercises, sorted based on how much research there is to support each criterion. I've included 3 super underrated exercises at the end of the video that nearly no one does, but that you should try doing. First, the bench press. The bench press is very loadable, easy to overload, and effectively targets the chest through its primary functions: shoulder horizontal adduction and some shoulder flexion for the upper pec. However, many people won't get their best chest stretch on the flat bench press.
After all, the rep ends when the bar touches your chest. Most people are capable of more horizontal shoulder adduction than that. The bench press can also take a while to load up, reducing its time efficiency. Since it's a compound movement, it does a good job of training the whole pushing musculature. But there's always the chance that your triceps or front delts could give out first.
All things considered, the bench press is a good option, but not your best. High detail. You can adjust grip width to improve the lift slightly. Taking a closer grip will provide a slightly greater stretch on the pecs. The trick is to touch relatively high in your chest to reduce the contribution of the triceps and front delts. Low ATA for the close grip bench press. While the wide grip bench press does shift the emphasis towards the pecs slightly by touching higher on your chest, it tends to reduce pec stretch slightly. So, high beta, same as a regular bench press. Using a Smith machine bench press instead has a few benefits over the regular bench press.
First, it allows you to remove the bar path and skill component, focusing more on simply pushing close to failure. You'll find you can touch higher on your chest without feeling much weaker, providing a deeper pec stretch.
Second, the Smith bench press can be a great option if you want to push close to failure but don't have a spotter. Unracking becomes much easier, and you can always re-rack when you fail. So, into mid-ATA the Smith machine bench press goes. What about the incline Smith machine press? How does it compare to the flat variation? Well, that's exactly what a study out of Brazil looked at. Chavez and colleagues compared the flat and 45-degree incline Smith machine bench press and their effects on lower and upper chest hypertrophy. Contrary to popular belief, the incline and flat bench press were equally effective for the lower chest. However, for the upper chest, the incline bench press did cause more muscle growth. Same growth in lower chest, more growth in the upper chest. While this is only one study, and the only study we have on pec growth from the bench press,
it does suggest we want to prioritize incline pressing variations for best pec growth. This makes even more sense when you consider that more people tend to struggle with upper chest growth, and that the upper chest contributes more heavily to the appearance of broad shoulders.
So, into mid-ATA, the incline Smith machine press goes. For the same reason, the incline barbell bench press beats the flat barbell bench press and goes into low ATA. Before we move on to dumbbell pressing variations, there are a couple more barbell bench press variations that are worth considering. First, the floor press.
It retains some of the benefits of a barbell press. It's easily loadable and easy to progress. However, it's time-consuming to set up, and it doesn't offer a great stretch. So, compared to other exercises, it just isn't a great option for building muscle.
Low CTA. If we keep the results of the study by Chavez and colleagues in mind, the decline bench press doesn't seem like a great exercise either.
However, it's still better than a floor press since the exercise at least has a stretched position.
Decline bench press goes into high CTA. The Larsen press removes leg drive from the bench press, whether by just extending your legs loosely or putting them up onto the bench, if your height starts with a 4.
Since you no longer have to coordinate leg drive with the rest of the movement, it also tends to reduce how technical the movement is. Additionally, it can help reduce excessive arching,
which can increase pec stretch, into high beta. Finally, we have the guillotine press. As I mentioned earlier, touching the bar higher onto your chest can shift the emphasis from your front delts and triceps more heavily onto your pecs.
So, the guillotine press can really help build your chest more than a traditional bench press. However, it does have a couple of small downsides. First, from my coaching experience, some people's shoulders really don't like this movement.
Second, doing these with the barbell may be somewhat unsafe, so I'd prioritize a Smith machine bench or a dumbbell bench, mid-ATA. Speaking of dumbbell pressing, let's talk about the incline dumbbell bench press.
The incline dumbbell bench press is phenomenal. It's easy to overload, either by adding reps or weight week to week. It provides a better stretch on the pecs than the barbell press, especially if you angle the dumbbells up slightly and bring the dumbbells out and down versus just straight down. It's also more time efficient than a barbell press by virtue of not needing to set up in a rack. Failing is also quite safe without a spotter, since you can just gently drop the dumbbells. The only downsides? Getting the dumbbells into position for some heavy-ass dumbbell pressing can be challenging. And the first rep can be hard, since you don't have any stretch reflex to initiate that first rep.
As a result, I wouldn't do dumbbell pressing for fewer than around 8 reps. Since it's a compound movement, your triceps and front delts could still give out first, though it's unlikely, especially if you focus on bringing the dumbbells out. Finally, some rare few people can get a deeper pec stretch than the dumbbells will allow them to, even with the tweaks I mentioned. Into mid-S tier this exercise goes. The flat dumbbell press has effectively the same upsides and downsides, but flat pressing might just be slightly worse for growth overall. Mid-S tier, just below incline dumbbell pressing. The one-arm dumbbell press is a markedly worse exercise. I'd only do it if all you have is a single dumbbell, as I did during the COVID lockdowns.
By training one arm at a time, your core has to heavily resist rotation, which does nothing for pec growth, but does make the lift substantially harder.
Into low beta. For an even worse exercise, try the plate press. This is a science channel, so let me give you the lowdown. Gravity still points downwards. Your pecs are producing force in a vector perpendicular to the resistance, making the movement completely unresisted.
In fact, the only thing being trained here is your front delts, and your fellow gym goer's ability to resist laughing.
Low beta. Before we move into machine, cable, and bodyweight exercises, let me tell you about MyoAdapt. MyoAdapt is the smartest training app soon to be on the market, perhaps as soon as December 2024. MyoAdapt ranks exercises scientifically based on effectiveness and gives you only S-tier exercises to maximize your muscle building. This can take months or years off your lifting journey and accelerate your progress. Go to myoadapt.com and sign up to be notified when the app finally launches. You'll be able to lock in a free trial and lifetime discount upon launch. First, we have the incline and flat chest press machines. While the incline chest press machine is slightly better than the flat chest press machine for overall growth, machines vary widely. In fact, from one chest machine to the next, you can easily go from a D-tier machine, it doesn't allow for a full stretch, maxes resistance at the top, and is plate loaded, looking at you, hammer strength, to an S-tier machine, which allows for a full stretch, has plenty of resistance in the stretch, and is stack loaded, like an Arsenal chest press. So I'm going to assume you have an average machine, which allows for some stretch and is stack loaded. Those can go into high and mid B tier respectively. The same goes for the lying chest press machine, though those tend to be less adjustable and plate loaded. Low beta. Our last two machine exercises are the pec deck and seated machine fly.
Pec decks can reduce bicep involvement and increase pec involvement. However, pec deck machines tend to be old and poorly constructed. Generally, they won't have much resistance in the stretch position and will rarely allow for a full stretch. They'll be ungodly difficult in the most shortened position.
That said, they can be a good variation to try if you want to isolate the pecs with less bicep involvement. High beta.
The seated machine fly is usually much better, especially if it happens to be a combo rear delt and pec fly machine. You can use the rear delt setting of the machine to get as much stretch as you could ever dream of. The resistance profile varies machine to machine, however, with most machines being hardest in the shortened position, the opposite of what is ideal.
It goes into high eta. Next, we have the 5 ways to do cable flies. Low to high to low, mid cable flies, lying cable flies, and cable crossovers. The worst of the bunch is likely the cable crossover.
The half of the range of motion where your arms cross over likely does very little for actually growing the pecs, since your pecs are in the most shortened position.
The movement also tends to be hardest in the shortened position, limiting how much weight you can use in the stretch before you fail. Mid-seater. Next, the low to high cable fly.
While shoulder flexion does help to target the upper pec somewhat, it also involves the biceps and front delts more heavily than most fly variations.
Into mid-beta. Do you want an even worse movement? Enter the dumbbell pec fly. No resistance in the stretch, no stretch. I would avoid this for pec growth. High beta. Instead, if you wanted to isolate your pecs, I'd recommend doing a pure shoulder horizontal adduction movement. Speaking of pure shoulder horizontal adduction, The mid-cable pec fly does exactly this, mid-AT.
The lying cable chest fly has the benefit of reducing stabilization required, but at the cost of requiring you to take up two of the gym's most valuable commodities for even more time.
This is sure to put you on the gym's most wanted list in no time. Mid-AT. Finally, the high to low cable fly targets the lower chest's functions of scapular depression and adduction of the shoulder, which is cool.
However, some bodyweight movements you're likely already doing can do this too. And this fly variation focuses more heavily on the lower pecs, which are slightly less important than the upper pecs.
Low AT. The best chest fly exercises are probably dumbbell flies and dumbbell fly presses. You can get an unlimited stretch on the pecs, and importantly, in contrast to the cable and machine variants, the resistance is greatest in the stretch and decreases as you shorten the pecs.
The dumbbell fly press also allows you to eccentrically overload the movement. It's unclear whether this causes more growth, but it sure feels nice.
Since they allow you to isolate the chest and tick pretty much every box for growth, into high ST they both go. Next, we have calisthenics movements, some of which are surprisingly solid chest builders. First, the most common one, the push-up, which I'll place into low beta. Why beta?
Well, the push-up has some pros. It doesn't require any setup or equipment. You can probably overload week to week by adding reps, and you get some bonus serratus anterior workout.
However, it has quite a few downsides. Once you get pretty strong, the loadability can become an issue. Push-up is notoriously annoying to load properly. So, you'll be restricted to doing it for sets of 20 or more reps, which can be hard to push close to failure. The stretch you're able to get on your pecs is also limited by when your body reaches the floor. Finally, there's quite a bit of stabilization involved by your hips and your core. You could try to load the push-up by adding a band around your shoulders, but this would make the movement less effective in all likelihood. Adding a band increases the resistance in the shortened position, making the stretch position relatively easier, into low CTA. The deficit push-up improves on the push-up drastically by accomplishing three things.
First, it makes the movement a bit harder, reducing the need for external load. Second, it increases how much of a stretch you can get on the pecs. Third, and least obviously, it also actually makes the external moment arm greater at the bottom of the movement in the stretch and smaller at the top of the movement.
It still has the issue of requiring a good amount of stabilization though, and it does not isolate the pecs, meaning your triceps could give out first or your front delts could give out first. S tier. For the same reasons, the ring push-up goes into low S tier. If you have rings or TRX bands and you experience wrist pain from doing regular push-ups, this could be a good option. On the topic of rings, here's our first underrated chest builder I promised you, the ring fly. The ring fly can be a great alternative to the dumbbell fly. It has many of the same benefits in terms of stretch, resistance profile, and being an isolation movement. Its only downsides are that it can be quite a challenging movement, limiting rep range flexibility, and that it requires a good deal of stabilization, high AT. The dip places a deep loaded stretch on the pecs. It also might stretch the upper chest pretty well, since it places your shoulder into deep hyperextension. It's just a very, very good all-around compound movement. The downsides?
Some people's joints struggle with dips. The front delts and triceps are pretty involved, and it can be a challenging movement, limiting rep range flexibility.
Low S tier. If you struggle with performing these, you can try the assisted dip machine, which also goes into low S tier. The band assisted dip and machine dip are inferior. The former reduces resistance in the stretch, while the machine dip can make it hard to get a full stretch and can be a bit awkward, into low beta. And finally, to round out our tier list, we have our two remaining underrated chest builders. But before that, if you'd like to get the ultimate gym clothing, check out Rascal Apparel, the nicest, most durable, squat-proof designs in the game, and use code WOLF at checkout to support me and for 10% off. The two final underrated chest builders are the camber bar bench press and the reverse grip bench press. The camber bar bench press is the single best chest compound movement. It allows for an unlimited stretch on the chest, and you can touch high on the torso to emphasize the pecs more than the tricep or front delt. It's loadable and easy to progress. Its only downside is that it's not as time efficient as the dumbbell option, into high S tier. The reverse grip barbell bench press is probably a decent option for chest growth. I like to try it for lifters who experience some shoulder pain with normal bench pressing. That said, a word of warning, set up spotter arms or get a spotter when doing this, as it can be a bit more dangerous than a regular bench press.
Since a greater deal of shoulder flexion is involved, you should feel this one more in the upper chest.
It has the downsides of a traditional bench press, but it can be a nice overlooked exercise. Into mid-beat 2. Here's the final tier list. Dr. Milo Wolf, chest tier list. Until next time.